Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Global Café. Today, I am very excited to be introducing you all to Miss Pia Hollenstein. So you may have heard of Pia and the organization which she's a member of, the KlimaSeniorinnen, or Senior Women for Climate Protection, when it was announced in April that the European Court of Human Rights ruled in favor of their argument that the Swiss government inadequate efforts to protect or to combat climate change put them at risk for dying during heat waves. So organizations such as Human Rights Watch have produced in-depth reports on older people being impacted by heat waves in other countries. So while Pia's activism is focused on older women in Switzerland, this is very much a landmark case in the timeline of the climate crisis overall. Pia completed her training as a nurse in 1972 with a diploma in AKP and a 2-year advanced training course in intensive care and resuscitation in 1975. She trained as a vocational teacher in 1984 and 85 and has worked as a teacher at the Stephenson School of Health and Nursing since 1985. From 1991 to 2006, she represented the Green Party in the Swiss National Council. And shortly after her tenure at the National Council, she completed the postgraduate course, Masters of Advanced Studies in Applied Ethics at the Ethics Center at the University of Zurich. In 2011, she then completed a part-time master's degree in geriatric care at the Kaleidos University. So we're really in the presence of someone who has been committed to lifelong learning and activism. So thank you very much for joining us, Pia. It's an honor. So before we speak about the climate change or climate case at the European Court of Human Rights, I wanted to ask you a little bit more about yourself, Pia. As we can see from your biography, throughout your life, you seem to always be pursuing new opportunities and avenues for advocacy and social justice. What has driven you in these pursuits?
Yes. Hello, everybody. I'm glad to be here, speak with you. I myself, I grew up on a farm with 8 brothers and sisters out in the countryside, my parents and with my grandmother. We all were very connected to nature and learned to appreciate it. The large family was probably the reason why I studied nursing profession and also spent 3 years as a nurse in development cooperation in Papua New Guinea. Who knows? The influence was there. Okay, what else do you want to know about me? Well, maybe I'm 74 now and engaged in this KlimaSeniorinnen case from the beginning. I'm a board member, okay?
Yeah, I'd love to get into how you became a board member of the KlimaSeniorinnen, but first I'd like to know, are there any particular lessons or experiences that you could share that were impactful in informing your advocacy on the climate change case?
Well, my experience is, in a way, many years. And as a mountaineering, I do mountaineering, I can see the difference in the mountains. To some mountains, you cannot climb anymore because they would fall down or would be dangerous. And the second thing we see in our mountains, that the glaciers are melting very fast. And this is our reservoir of water. It's really sad to see how from year to year the glaciers became shorter. They are melting, and that's a big concern.
Yeah, I'm sure. I think there's something to be said to be in a space over the course of your lifetime and to see how that space changes as a result of climate change. So thank you for sharing that. So now that we've learned a little bit more about you, could you share with us how KlimaSeniorinnen became an organization?
Yeah, actually, I was retired already, and I was asked to join the board to build this association. But I guess it's interesting how it started in Switzerland, because Switzerland in the parliament, I knew from my time in parliament that Swiss government, Swiss parliament doesn't do enough against climate change. So at that time, we were a bit helpless. What can we do more? But then there was a case of climate claim in Holland, in the Netherlands. An NGO had won a lawsuit against the state. And this raised the question of how more could be achieved with a claim in Switzerland for the climate. So Greenpeace carried out a study into to find out what would be the most effective way to bring a lawsuit in Switzerland. And it was clear that the chances of winning are greater if a group of people who are excessively affected take legal action. And it was known already at that time that women over 70, they suffer more during heat waves. So that was the reason why we said, okay, we must found an association just with women over 64, we said. So we have, in the meantime, we have nearly 3,000 members with women over 64. And the big work before we started did Greenpeace. But now, since we are an association, we are independent from Greenpeace, except the financial thing, because we could not afford so much which is needed to bring the subject to the court if Greenpeace would not pay for. We all in the association, of course, we work voluntary, but the lawyers, they cost a lot. And it was necessary to have good lawyers and so on. Yeah. So far, that might be interesting, because sometimes when I mention that, sometimes some small NGOs ask me, would it be worth for them to do the same and so on? And then I must tell them, so far, our lawsuit has cost over 1 million Swiss francs. We have been able to pay, the KlimaSeniorinnen, our association, have been able to pay for 1/3 of this as a donation, and the rest Greenpeace is paying. So the same, or to copy our case, is not so easy as long as the financial subject is not cleared. Yeah, that's the truth.
Yeah, thank you, Pia. And there is something to be said for the kind of social resources you need as well to be able to stay involved in a case for so long. So you're 74 years old, as you shared, and many people imagine that following retirement that they might slow down their pace of life, but you're incredibly busy, and you have been for the past 8 years with KlimaSeniorinnen, let alone other aspects of your life. So what motivated you to become so involved in responding to the climate crisis?
Well, maybe different things, but it's good for me in my age not being in the job anymore, and for other people might be the same. It's good to have a meaningful task in old age. That's what I think. It makes sense for me to be able to make my contribution to society. That's inside me, a voice which is telling me that's good, and I feel it. It's good to do something. If I no longer would have a meaningful job, I could become depressed. And in these days, I'm not depressed. I always have much to do. The climate situation is so bad that everyone has to do what they can. So I belong to the group, that's not to forget, I belong to a group of people who have contributed a lot to the destruction of the climate 50 years ago. I think I therefore also have a responsibility.
Yeah, I'd love to speak to that a little bit more, because that's a really fascinating position to be in. But first, I wanted to ask, did you imagine 8 years ago when you first joined the board of KlimaSeniorinnen that you would still be involved today?
Not really, but that task still makes sense. So I never gave up. That was never the question.
Mm-hmm. And then earlier, you were also speaking about how other NGOs approach you and ask about your experiences and whether engaging in a similar type of advocacy, yeah, if that's something that they should consider. What would you say are the key contributors of success for your organization?
Our success, well, I think very important is the fact that you must be 150% convinced of the importance of the matter. Otherwise, you give up. And second, the networking is very important. So I had a big network already, but to come to that point where we are now, it was important to have a good network and also supporters with specialist exercise, with different exercise in the back. And of course, you need money.
Mm-hmm.
These 3 points.
Yes, and I'm sure the support of Greenpeace must have, of course, been incredibly helpful as well. So could you speak a little bit more about the basis of the case? How are older people more vulnerable to the effects of climate change?
That's a very important question, because otherwise we could not have done this special claim. Already more than 9 years ago, research has shown that women's bodies react differently to extreme heat. That's the fact. Women collapse more quickly, have circulatory problems, and if the doctor then tells the women to stay at home and not to go outside, she may get pneumonia, thrombosis due to lack of exercise. That can lead to death. And not forgetting the social aspects. If you are not allowed to go out anymore, you can get depressed. And for a human being, the social and aspect is important too. So there is, I must say, there is much research needed yet, but there are worldwide a few researchers which prove this. That's why it's proved many more women over 70 die during heat waves, not because we are more in the world. It's because those who die, a higher percentage of women die during the waves. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So then how are older women's human rights being violated by the Swiss government?
Yeah, there is a paper, 250 pages, but one can say because the climate measures are inadequate. The constitution is being violated. We didn't know if we come through with that aspect, but it's now proved. The duty to protect is not being adequately fulfilled, leading to complications and isolation. This disrupts family life, the violates of fundamental rights. That's why it is the important thing is personal and family life is not guaranteed as it should be because of these heat waves.
Certainly. And then I know in the chat, we have a little bit of discussion going on, and connecting the dots has been mentioned by a few individuals. Dominic Boyd, you said you wanted to speak a little bit further to it. Would you be able to unmute and explain kind of the link between poverty and climate change?
Thank you very much. I really appreciate the opportunity to do this, to share this wonderful resource. And I see that Ireland, there's something similar. I'm going to have to check that out when I get a moment. So I'm with the Community Health Board here in Nova Scotia. There are 37 community health boards, and we focused on improving community health and advocacy related to the different factors, the social determinants of health. So we came across this item called Connecting the Dots, and it's about poverty and climate change. And who are the people that are most affected? Are people who are marginalized, who live in poverty, people from indigenous populations, but we also recognize that older adults are part of that more marginalized, more vulnerable group. And it occurred to me that the community health boards could all unite together on this issue to push for more attention to be paid to the issues of climate change, of global heating. And we're forming a connection with a local group called the Ecology Action Centre, which is active here in Nova Scotia. And one of the steps that we're taking as a kind of a beginning of working together is the Ecology Action Centre has developed a series of questions which we can circulate through our different community health boards. There are municipal elections coming up in October. So these questions will be available to community health board members and other people that they can share them with, so they can talk knowledgeably with people who are running for election and can push them to take a stand on improving things regarding the climate issues. So I wanted to share this Connecting the Dots item with everybody, and I encourage you to read it and to pass it on. Utilize it, adapt it for your own purposes if you like. It was put together by the community health boards, by mental health and addictions health promotion team, and our public health healthy communities team. So certainly some real good collaboration in putting this together. So I was excited to see that this topic is the big item for our discussion this morning, and so I really am glad. I thank you, Sarah, for the opportunity to say something about this.
Yes, of course. And thank you for highlighting, I think, the intersectional nature, like Pia was speaking about, of climate change and the impacts of the climate crisis, as well as perhaps like a more community-based response to it. So we will include that resource in our show notes, and I see that it's also in the chat. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Of course. So Pia, back to you. So like many social justice and community care responses, this case, your climate case, was led by women, while we know that the primary driver of the climate crisis, the fossil fuel industry, is an industry predominantly made up of men. How do you think gender impacts individuals' understanding of their responsibility to their community?
A difficult question, but on one hand, on the other hand, one knows that we live in a world values are different from the majority of men. It's masculine, which means bigger, stronger, faster, and this is one reason that women feel different, I guess. So, yeah, I don't have the solution from 1 minute to the other, but our whole system, our living together is forced by a different view of life, I guess.
Yeah, that idea of lived experience impacting your actions. Earlier in the week we met and you were sharing that you felt you were comfortable in sharing your opinions and taking action in part because of your nursing education. Could you speak a little bit more about that and how the dynamics within the field of nursing impacted you?
Well, if I understood right, maybe I was in a different society somehow, because I was in a women's community. But when I came to politics, I realized from the first day on that there are different rules. Majority of men, they tell you, or it's the way they react different. And if you come as a minority, as a woman, you have to adapt somehow. That was not so easy in the beginning, but we women have to learn how it works like and what's going on here. So if you check how it's going on, you can influence better the way you would like to have it. And of course, one thing is you have to support women and not always react. If a man said something, you shouldn't. You should support the women, and then they can go on with their meaning, and people would listen to her more. Yeah.
Yeah, that idea of conscious listening and using, I think, privilege that comes with a position to highlight others' contributions is important.
Yeah, and I think watch out for this automatism is very important. We have to realize and to refer to what the woman said before and give her space to go on. And that could balance a little bit the inequality in this space.
Yeah, for sure. Certainly. Thank you for that. We know that lots of responses to the climate crisis are led by younger generations. We saw with Greta, her school strike, this kind of rose her to international acclaim. But speaking of future or younger generations, what has the reaction of younger generations been to the activism of your organization, the KlimaSeniorinnen?
Yes, the young people from the climate strike think we are great. It's very unusual. All the women as a group, we sometimes work together. I'm often invited to public events with a young person from the climate strike. When the churches want to have a discussion in the evening, they invite might be me and another woman or boy from the climate strike. And we have different focus. We have the same goal, but we have different ways to reach our goals, and we do not have the same goal. I mean, finally, yes, but we have different roads to go on. The young people, when I'm with them, they have much greater knowledge of facts and figures, and that's also important if you have a public evening. So one can say we always complement each other well. And a big difference is, of course, it's their future. It's about their future. They can really going for their future. They can tell them, but here and there, and if you don't do this and that, we will not have a future. So they are quite glaubwürdig. Yeah, you see it's really serious for them.
Yeah, the stakes are high. And I think speaking as a younger person.
Yes, and on the other hand, they appreciate it very much when I give a short speak at their public strike events. Yeah, so we have a good working together.
I'm sure, I'm sure. And I think it can be reassuring to have those older generations supporting you and saying, you're right, we do need to take action.
Some are surprised that an old woman still doing this because they have different pictures of old women, old men. And they think, that's this one. Yes, it's a good experience for both.
Yeah, it's combating ageism. Because what do you think they think that older men and women, how they should be acting? Why are they surprised, do you think?
We work with them together. We ask what's their goal. If the police, they would never ask what are you doing here or what for. They just take them. So they appreciate that someone is listening to them and someone takes them serious. So that's something for them. It's a good experience for them.
Yeah, I'm sure. So when the case was won at the European Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg, this was a historic victory that sets a critical legal precedent. What was it like to be in the room when the verdict was announced? My understanding is that there were 2 other climate cases led by other activists that were unsuccessful. So did you expect to win?
We didn't know what we can expect, but we were all quite nervous. We have prepared ourselves internally for various possibilities. We didn't expect that we would win that much. That was an overwhelming feeling. It was everything in French or English, and I hardly couldn't believe when I listened to it that that's true, that we won that much. So we were proved right and normal. We got right, how to say in English, they gave us right in almost all points. A few tears were shed. Yeah, we couldn't believe it. We didn't expect that much.
I'm sure, especially after just such a long period of waiting.
Yeah.
And yeah. I see we have a few questions in the chat, including one from Shmuel, one of our regular contributors. So I would like to go to his question, but first, while we're speaking about the case, I would love to hear Eileen's question. Eileen, would you be able to unmute?
Oh, Sarah, thank you very much. Yes, I'm interested in the process and the frustrations and the learning experience of going through the European Court of Human Rights and the ups and downs, how long it took, how did you fund it, and how did you focus in on the rights to private and family life as being your argument?
This juristic arguments, the lawyers had to find out, and they presented it for us. I'm not a lawyer, so I just can give a few sentences. They explain it this way: if you are disabled because of the heat, you cannot, or you don't feel fit at all, so you don't go out anymore. Also, your family and your private life is less, and that's not that shouldn't be like this. If the meaning is, if the government would do more against climate change, we would not suffer this specific moment I just explained. So there are researchers who confirmed that, who confirm it, yeah.
And as regards just clarification, the frustrations, how long did it take And how much did it cost, and how were you funding it?
Frustration, I don't understand what you mean
So
by
like the barriers or what was difficult about the case.
that.
Personally,
We were in the happy situation that all of us in the board, we had a good, very good relationship to each other. We never had, really never had problems. We were all occupied, and we knew we are going to the same goal.
Did you know each other before?
No,
board
not
members?
really. No, I knew one I have met before. I knew one from another part. She's also in the Green Party, but all the others I didn't know. It was a Greenpeace choose activist women from different part of Switzerland. I'm the one from the eastern part, and they knew me from the parliament, and they knew I'm retired now, so they asked me. And the others, all the others, are from a different part of Switzerland to cover the French-speaking part, to cover the Italian-speaking part. No, we didn't know each other.
Okay, so Greenpeace brought you together and invited you each individually?
Yes.
And that was just to answer the other.
The first 3 years we came together in a restaurant in the middle of Switzerland. That the one from Geneva and me from St. Gallen, and the one from the south, they have about the same journey to do. But then Corona came, and from there, from that point, we have the meetings mostly online. That changed. But I mean, the General Assembly, and so we have in Bern, in the city.
And then
So
that was 8 years ago that you came together, yes?
Yes, and we do a lot, I shouldn't tell you how much, of mailing every day. Yes.
Of mailing to each other, back and forth?
Oh, yes. What should we do here, there? What would we say to this? And then we also have a good relationship to the Greenpeace people. The one responsible for climate is the one who started us, and he is the head of the knowledge, which is also important for us.
Okay.
And 20% secretary is doing the secretary work for us.
Thank you. I hope that answered your question, Eileen. Thank you, as always. So now turning back to Shmuel's question. So Shmuel is a regular contributor to the IFA Global Café, and he is wanting to know how tackling climate change can improve the social well-being of older people who may be living in poverty or the poorer kind of groups of a population.
That's difficult. I don't have a very good answer, because our focus is now, if the government does more, it would help also, it should help everybody in the country, you know. But the poor one, they suffer more, they have not so good apartments and so on, but we don't focus on those, but we know that society and the climate change, you cannot separate it. It's going together. That's we know, but we focus on the things government should do.
And I think it's interesting you highlight that action occurs within a country, but we also know that climate action impacts the whole world, like we were speaking about earlier, so that action in one country will kind of affect others as well.
But I may say something to that.
Of course.
We didn't get the right because Switzerland doesn't do enough. A second success was that a human rights violation Switzerland was doing because they didn't give us an appointment to explain our worries. We were never invited in all the 3 Swiss courts, and that's not correct, which means it said this is a human rights violation. So if people in other European countries claim, they have to be heard. That's new. That's a big success. That also NGOs are allowed to claim some circumstances, but they are allowed to go to human rights, because it's the first time climate change is accepted as a human right. The state has to react.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. So in the media, it was shared that your case was successful, and from at least the North American and Canadian media that I read, it seems that the Swiss government had no choice but to take action following your victory in the courts. So what action did the court require, and is this being implemented in Switzerland?
Well, we were a bit surprised that the parliament, the beginning of this week, refused the court's paper. That's really a bad thing and is actually not allowed. They say doing enough already. Even it's really good written down in the paper that it's not. But they say, oh, they didn't take in account this and that, and we are good enough. So that's the parliament. We have to separate the positions in Switzerland. The parliament, this, let's say, right-wing majority, and they said it, we don't want it. Majority said, we refuse. They did not a good job. They asked for too much, and it's just not the way they wrote. But our federal council, the executive, the 7 people who lead the country, not in the parliament, the full job executive, it's their duty now to look at and then to bring new ideas how we can achieve higher goals. And the Federal Council said they are studying yet that paper, and in August they will tell us what they are going to do and how much and so on. But that's the Swiss, not very good. That's never happened before. When I was in Parliament, if something came from the Human Rights Court, there was no question, we did it. And this is the first time that majority is telling them we are not doing it. That's really bad. It's a shame, what I think, because human rights do not depend on political majorities. That's what I say. They are not indivisible, but they did. So we are hoping in the Federal Council in August, and we think he will take a different position. And it's not on the parliament to come over that. It's the duty of the government. The government means the seven ministers. So somehow it's a shame that they refuse. but we didn't expect that. We were really surprised that it is like this.
Yes, I'm sure, especially coming off a victory like the victory in April, to then have the government say that they're not going to, or the parliament to say that they're not going to follow, that it must have been frustrating. So I think that answers part of Krista Moller-Metzger's question. But Krista, I know you had a kind of a follow-up question about older people engaging in activism in other countries. Would you like to unmute and ask your question?
Yes, we were in contact with Greenpeace in Germany, and we discussed how we can go on and and have more pressure on the government in Germany. And we discussed this with Greenpeace, and at first we came to Strasbourg, and we heard how brilliant the lawyers spoke, and how it was so clear, and Switzerland was, you couldn't compare. It was a big difference, and it was really great how the lawyers acted. And and we found it a small, after this, when we were there, and we were really impressed. We founded a small group, and we always go to demonstrations, to klimastrikes, and and now we are thinking about how we can act in future. What can we do? We are in contact with Rosemarie Wittler-Welti from the KlimaSeniorinnen, and but we are not sure. But we just go out and have the signs. We have the same flags as you, with KlimaSeniorinnen written down, and we are always on the demonstrations. And the young people, they like it very much when we are coming. And yes, what do you think? The first question was, are there other groups in Europe who are founding such a KlimaSenioren group? And the second one is, what do you think? What can we do to support? Thank you.
Yes, I don't know about many countries in Europe. I have been in Bregenz in Austria. They have smaller groups, but they are more focused on what can we do locally. They intervene to the government there and so on. The same, I wouldn't know about the similar organization in Europe, but since we give interviews all over the world, in South Korea, there is a women group that wanted to copy us one-to-one. We will see. They are very interested, and they said they are going to do the same. We'll see. And in Tanzania, there is an active group, but I guess you cannot compare it with our group. So I must say, I don't know another group which would be about the same. No, but in Europe, it's not so important now to start from the beginning, because Switzerland is member of the European Council, Europarat, and because the court is the court of the European Council, that means all the other, this paper is valued for all the other countries too. And because NGOs are now allowed to claim at the court in Strasbourg, you can check in now already, would you win or not? If it's clear you would win, I say the government of that country would do better, do it now, and not let the NGOs go to Strasbourg. But it's not that easy. There are some criteria which have to be fulfilled that you are allowed to go. That's in the paper. It's you have to be a group for a long time. You have to be a group which focus only on climate and so on. But it's possible.
Thank you for that, Pia, and thank you for sharing international examples as well. It's fascinating to see the impact of the foundation that your organization created and the ripple effects it can have throughout Europe, but also globally. And thank you, Krista, for your additions as well. So we're quickly approaching the end of the cafe today, but I wanted to speak a little bit more about political ideology. So in your last response to my question, you were talking about how the National Council is predominantly right-leaning at the moment, but the climate crisis is unique in that regardless of how someone votes or their political leanings, we're all impacted to a certain degree. So how can we support the concept that climate change is an issue for all positions along the political spectrum to respond to?
Well, you have to be active in all the different parts of the society. Started with the NGOs, but also the firms, and everybody would have to be active in trying or checking what is my part to do. And then I say it again, the networking is really the secret to come together and to reach something. It was in our part too, otherwise we would not have 3,000 members. And to come together to be powerful, you also need a big knowledge. So it's good to have people from different spaces, or to how to say, I'm sorry, my English is not that good, but you may understand. I might be the big change doesn't come from the government. It comes from the society themselves, even the Wirtschaft, how to say, the firms. They cannot exist if the climate change is getting worse and worse. So they are interested to have more solar chain and so on. Maybe they realize it better than the politics, but it's both needed. The politics is needed because to have to give the frame, and of course, that's I don't know what you think about, but I always say you have to be active in politics to have more influence, to get different majorities there. Maybe it's just I don't know if it works, but I think there are the right people at the right spot, and it would change a little bit more.
Yes, and I think throughout our conversation today, you've been speaking about the power that comes with using your voice. So whether this is using your voice when you're voting or in activism outside of politics, that's really critical, but also listening at the same time to others. So last question of today, what is next for the KlimaSeniorinnen? Where do you go from here?
Yeah, it's true that it is still far little known that all the women are more affected by heat waves, and that it hurts them. That means we, the KlimaSeniorinnen, we go on with public relation work, and now very important, we keep an eye on the parliamentarians, on the government, and we try to have influence there. Because when we write the press release, KlimaSeniorinnen complain about this and that, we have a good public. Yeah, so we go on that.
Perfect, thank you. And we'll be eagerly awaiting news in August of how
Yes.
The government decides to take action. So we are coming to a close at the end of the Global Café. So I'd love to hear your key takeaway messages for today's discussion. But to allow you to gather your thoughts, I'll first introduce our next week's topic and speaker. So please join our discussion next week with Dr. Rolf Martens, who will be discussing Alzheimer's disease diagnosis, prevention, and treatment. So back to you, Pia. Could you share your key takeaway message for our audience today?
Well, still, we are in the happy position that the Federal Constitution and the Human Rights Constitution must protect the health of all. But there is much to do yet. We must learn to see ourselves, that's another spot, as part of a globalized world. Only then we will succeed. And in Switzerland, it's rather difficult to see us as a whole in a globalized world. We cannot afford to be hopeless, said Dorothee Sölle, you might know her, a famous theologian. We cannot afford to be hopeless. I would like to give that through. That's my belief.
What a way to end the cafe. We can't afford to be hopeless. So thank you so much, Pia, for being so generous with your time today. I know as a younger person, it's incredibly inspiring and comforting to know that older generations are committed to holding governments accountable to responding to the climate crisis, when we know that climate change will only continue to increase in the coming decades. And perhaps when I'm an older person, my human rights may be respected because of your work. So reminding everyone that tomorrow, 15th of June, is World Elder Abuse Awareness Week. Many organizations are hosting events to mark the occasion. So I believe there's one at the United Nations in New York today. And then WHO is hosting one on Monday for anyone interested. Before we sign off, I would like to again thank you all, our fantastic audience, for participating, asking the questions, contributing to fantastic conversations, and also to thank the incredible people working at the IFA, in particular, Luana Colnego, who makes all of this happen behind the scenes. So I hope to see you all next Friday and wishing you a great weekend. Thank you.